In this video, we're going to step back into old Shanghai, and you can almost picture it frame by frame. Imagine wooden sailing boats crowding the docks, steamships releasing thick clouds into the air, workers hauling cargo with ropes over their shoulders, rows of warehouses stacked with tea chests and silk bundles, brick buildings rising beside muddy streets, smokestacks pushing smoke into a gray sky. This is the Shanghai of the 1800s and early 1900s, a city built by ships, trade, factories, and constant construction. If you enjoy visual, cinematic history like this, subscribe for more deep reconstructions. This is the story of how Shanghai transformed over roughly a century, from the early 1800s to 1949. In about 100 years, it evolved from a working port into one of the busiest and most intense cities of its era. It wasn't built quietly. It was built through trade booms, rebellion, industrial expansion, conflict, and rebuilding. In the early 1800s, picture a busy waterfront lined with wooden docks. Narrow boats glide through the water. Larger sailing ships anchor farther out. Dock workers carry crates by hand. Merchants shout orders. Warehouses made of brick and timber sit directly behind the docks. The city smells of river water, wood, and coal smoke. Then 1842 changed everything. After conflict and negotiation, the city was forced to open to foreign trade. Suddenly, new types of ships began arriving. Larger vessels, steam-powered ships with metal hulls. You can imagine them pulling into port, dwarfing older wooden boats. New docks were built. Stronger piers, reinforced with stone and timber, replaced simpler landing areas. Soon after, separate districts were established under different administrations. In these zones, construction accelerated. Wide streets were laid out in grid patterns. Multi-story brick buildings rose quickly. Government offices, trading houses, banks, and consulates appeared. Gas lamps were installed along certain roads. The architecture began to shift. Heavier stone foundations, taller facades, decorative balconies. By the 1850s, steamships became common. Picture black smoke rolling over the harbor, cranes lifting cargo, ship repair yards expanding with metal tools and mechanical parts. Navigation was no longer dependent only on wind. Trade became faster, more predictable, more aggressive. In 1853, during a major internal rebellion, armed forces entered the city. Streets once filled with merchants were suddenly filled with barricades. Defensive walls were reinforced. Some buildings were damaged. Trade slowed. Warehouses stood half-empty for periods of time. But the port never completely died. Boats kept arriving. Cargo kept moving. Through the 1860s and 1870s, rebuilding intensified. More permanent brick structures replaced earlier wooden ones. Shipyards grew larger. Telegraph poles appeared along roads. Rail lines began connecting the port to inland production areas. Now imagine trains arriving with goods, unloading near the docks, transferring cargo directly to waiting ships. By the 1880s and 1890s, factories emerged. Textile mills with tall chimneys dominated certain districts. You can picture workers entering massive industrial buildings before sunrise. Coal-powered engines turning gears. Rows of machinery clanking loudly. Worker housing blocks constructed quickly nearby. Simple brick buildings, tightly packed. At night, parts of the city glowed with electric lights by the early 1900s. Tram lines ran along major streets. Financial institutions operated from impressive stone buildings with columns and high windows. Shipping companies advertised global routes. Newspapers were printed in large quantities. In 1911, revolution brought political upheaval. Flags changed. Authority shifted. Armed patrols moved through certain districts. But the port continued operating. Ships still lined the waterfront. Cargo still moved from rail to dock to steamship. The 1920s were intense. Imagine neon signs lighting up streets at night. Cars mixing with rickshaws, banks crowded with investors, ship horns echoing through foggy mornings. Industrial output surged, construction continued. Taller buildings, reinforced concrete frames, modern facades. But tension rose. In 1927, violent purges reshaped the political structure. Streets that once buzzed with business saw arrests and armed clashes. The atmosphere hardened. Still, factories operated. Docks functioned. Trade remained central. Then 1937 brought large-scale war to the city. Bombardments shattered buildings. Smoke covered the skyline. Sections of the port were damaged. Civilians fled certain districts. Warehouses burned. Ships were halted or redirected. The city endured occupation and hardship through the 1940s. Inflation rose. Supplies became scarce. Black markets appeared. Now we move forward, without repeating the docks and steamships you've already seen in your mind. The harbor was only one layer of the city. What truly reshaped Shanghai in the early 1900s was the system behind it. Finance, labor, expansion upward, and the tightening grip of politics. By the 1910s, reinforced concrete began replacing traditional brick in larger commercial structures. Steel frames allowed buildings to rise higher than before. Elevators were installed in select office buildings. You can imagine scaffolding wrapping around half-finished facades. Workers mixing concrete by hand. Buckets lifted by pulley systems. Construction became vertical. Banking networks expanded aggressively in the 1920s. Financial speculation intensified. Trading floors buzzed with voices. Paper certificates changed hands rapidly. Currency flowed in and out at high speed. Wealth could be made in weeks and lost just as fast. Entire blocks became financial corridors lined with imposing facades meant to project stability. At the same time, population growth accelerated. Migrant laborers continued arriving in waves. Housing shortages became severe. Dense residential districts formed quickly. Multi-family tenements were constructed tightly side by side. Narrow interior courtyards provided limited light and airflow. Sanitation systems struggled to keep up. Overcrowding became one of the defining pressures of the era. The industrial sector diversified during the 1920s and early 1930s. Beyond textiles, manufacturing expanded into machinery assembly, printing, chemical processing, and food production. Factory complexes grew larger. Time whistles regulated worker shifts. Labor unions strengthened, organizing strikes that occasionally halted production. Industrial disputes became more frequent and more organized. By the early 1930s, political tension deepened. Surveillance increased. Intelligence networks expanded. Rival factions competed for influence. Public demonstrations were sometimes suppressed violently. Yet daily commerce continued. The city had developed resilience, almost a separation between politics and economic rhythm. Construction techniques evolved again during this period. Art Deco and modernist styles appeared in commercial districts. Curved corners, geometric ornamentation, streamlined facades, steel window frames. The aesthetic shifted from purely functional brick blocks to ambitious architectural statements signaling modernity. Then came the late 1930s escalation of armed conflict. Urban warfare reshaped entire districts. Defensive barricades appeared. Artillery damage scarred buildings. Infrastructure systems, electricity, water, transport, were strained or disrupted. Civilian displacement intensified,